If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description.
You know what? I'm just gonna leave.
INAYAH Life After Gods caught my eye with its silky smooth animation. Then, it really grabbed my attention after I did some digging and found out that it has multiple weapons and skill trees. By the time I discovered how open the game was with its map, I was already sold. But I suppose I should know what the game is about before I jump in. INAYAH Life After Gods takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where ancient gods once lived. After the gods' downfall, humans are left in a destroyed world to fend for themselves. You play as INAYAH, a woman who's lost her father and her mentor and is now determined to find her tribe. Sweet setup, but is it a sweet Metroidvania?
Combat.
When it comes to combat, INAYAH has a lot going on. So much so that going over combat exhaustively would be exhausting, both to cover and to listen to, thanks to the game's 18 skill trees, which I will discuss in the progression section. For now, let's keep things simple. And the simplest way I can describe INAYAH's combat is that it's a mix of Blasphemous 2 and Hollow Knight. If that got your ears to perk, then you're definitely gonna want to listen to the rest of this section. The Hollow Knight comparison refers to how fluid INAYAH's movements are. It reminds me a lot of how the Knight controls, especially when she pogos off things. And the Blasphemous 2 comparison comes from her 3 weapons and how the game pretty much does exactly what Blasphemous 2 does. Offers you 3 weapons to start with the promise of getting all 3 eventually. You got your dual blades for fast chopping action, your fists for decimating anything that doesn't move, and your flail that's so slow you might as well mail your attack to whoever you're hitting. Needless to say, I went with the blades. They're the only weapon you can use while moving. Plus, they give you a faux double jump with their aerial upslash. That's right, each weapon also doubles as a traversal ability, but more on that in the next section. Once you find all 3 weapons, you can seamlessly switch between them during combat and platforming, the latter of which providing a pretty significant challenge. Combat basics are pretty solid. Like I said, INAYAH's movements feel very fluid, making combat feel just as buttery smooth, as long as you're playing with the blades. As mentioned earlier, using the fists and flail stop you dead in your tracks. So I found these weapons to be way more situational than the almighty blades. Each weapon comes with different skills, and these skills can be unlocked and improved in the skill trees. Like I said, I'm not going to go over INAYAH's combat exhaustively because there's so much to it, but these special skills each weapon can gain can be procced under certain conditions and when they're not in a cooldown. For example, you gain Zeal with the blades whenever you do a 3-hit combo, and Zeal can then be used to do a lot of the blade's moves and special skills. The fists and flail have different but similar mechanics as well. It all adds up to create interesting combat full of synergies and scenarios. Though, honestly, I got by mostly with just the blades. INAYAH just controls so much better. But INAYAH isn't all about slicing and dicing, pounding and crushing. She has a roll with iframes, a parry with her blades, a shield that negates damage with her fists, a projectile absorber in her flail, and a healing mechanic that can be upgraded by discovering flowers throughout the map. And you're gonna need all these defensive maneuvers because the bosses in INAYAH are no joke. Boss battles are an absolute highlight, offering diverse and tricky challenges. With around 24 bosses, each encounter feels pretty distinct, with many of the bosses having different quirks and weaknesses you need to discover. I don't want to spoil anything, but some bosses are dang near impossible to beat unless you figure out how to deal with them, making some encounters slightly puzzle-like. Great examples are the Mad Chief, the Predator, and the Brute. And you can get hints on how to deal with these trickier bosses by collecting clues in the environment. It's kind of like in Death's Gambit Afterlife when you find those tomes to get extra damage against the bosses. INAYAH does this too, except it gives you more damage and hints on how to deal with the bosses. Plus, the environmental hints are more clever than finding tomes floating around randomly, so a point for INAYAH. Now, I will tell you, I was not having a lot of fun with the bosses at first because they were just so tanky. But it turns out these tanky bosses were actually advanced bosses I shouldn't have been fighting yet. Of course, I fought and defeated them anyway because I'm stubborn like that. Check out this plant boss I fought way too early and the stupid strategy I used to take them down anyway. It's beautiful, isn't it? But yeah, if you take on bosses in the correct order, they're a little easier to take down, though they can still be challenging. And if you find them too challenging, you can always change the difficulty at any time. That's it for combat. INAYAH Life After Gods delivers a combat experience that's fluid, challenging, and deeply customizable. Whether you're dashing between enemies with the blades, timing your parries perfectly, or using environmental clues to outsmart bosses, the game offers plenty of rewarding moments. While some weapons feel more situational than others, the sheer variety of abilities and playstyles ensures that combat remains engaging throughout. And with its tough but fair boss fights, INAYAH keeps you on your toes, making every victory feel well earned.
Abilities. Platforming.
INAYAH's abilities are as standard gets, though there is an interesting twist that your fingers will live to regret. INAYAH gets an equipable double jump and air dash, but that's not the twist. The twist is that each weapon has their own abilities, and this is a boon and a curse. A boon if you want platforming to be harder than it needs to be, and a curse if you want platforming to be harder than it needs to be. Basically, if you want to double jump without equipping the double jump, then you'll need to equip the blade and do an aerial up attack, or equip the fists and direct your propulsion after shooting a fireball. Each of the three weapons has some kind of thing it can do, and ensuring you have the right weapon equipped to do the thing becomes a challenge in some platforming sections. INAYAH's platforming is pretty integral to its experience. The early game is rife with utility gating that can only be surmounted after acquiring a specific weapon. So selecting your first weapon is crucial to how that early game is going to play out for you. I've already recommended getting the blades first, as they give you a faux double jump and allow you to pogo off enemies, so it's pretty versatile. Plus, it's just the best weapon in the bunch. Don't at me in the comments, you know I'm right. Regardless of the weapon you pick, you won't have to worry about buyer's remorse for too long, as the other weapons can be found pretty early. And their locations are even placed on the map for you, so definitely focus on getting them ASAP. Platforming in general is pretty dang fun. INAYAH moves so fluidly, and you're given ample opportunities to pogo and wall climb and grab ledges and magnetize yourself to things. When the platforming is rudimentary, it's easy and fun. But when things get more complex, that's when the game separates the boys from the men. Not really, but some of these sequences can be pretty tough. But the toughest sequences are going to be the more innocuous ones, where the game asks you to swap weapons multiple times. Oh, baby, was I terrible at this. There are so many sections that require you to go from one weapon to the other pretty quickly, and when most of these commands are done using the shoulder buttons and triggers, it just feels a little unnatural. Thankfully, you can make things infinitely easier by switching up how you cycle through your weapons. If you switch to radial, time stops, giving you plenty of breathing room as you process how to proceed. I personally didn't like stopping time by switching weapons because it interrupted game flow, but I can see people using this technique to get past sections they're having trouble with, and it's cool the option exists. That's it for this section. All in all, INAYAH Life After Gods offers platforming that is both rewarding and occasionally frustrating, thanks to its weapon-based traversal mechanics. While the challenge of swapping between weapons mid-platforming can feel a bit cumbersome, the fluid movement and variety of abilities make for an engaging experience. And with the option to stop time for weapon swaps, players have the flexibility to tackle tricky sections in a way that suits them best.
Progression.
Oh boy, does INAYAH have some progression systems to talk about. Let's get the big one out of the way first, the skill trees. There are 18 of them. 18! There are 3 weapons in total INAYAH gets, and each weapon comes with 6 trees. These trees are actually pretty intuitive to follow once you dive into them, but your initial brush with these trees will leave you with analysis paralysis. There's just so many nodes. But don't get overwhelmed, or else you're gonna miss out on your ideal build. INAYAH does this thing where you lock yourself out of skill paths if you choose certain nodes. This was something that caught me off guard, though the game clearly shows you the consequences of choosing nodes by providing a helpful red X. Personally, I was overwhelmed looking at all these nodes and just started dropping gold dust or whatever it is in dagger nodes I thought were cool. Not the best strategy, but it got me through. So yeah, there's no traditional leveling in this game, but enemies drop gold dust upon defeat, and you use this to unlock nodes on the mini skill trees. INAYAH is a game meant to be played multiple times if you want to experience everything, and this is apparent not only in how the skill trees block you, but also in the game's dialogue trees. I know I usually save this kind of stuff for the atmosphere narrative section, but so much of what you experience in the game can be attributed to how you answer NPCs along the way. Ultimately, the dialogue trees boil down to 3 answer types: selfless, greedy, and, I don't know, dickhead. Depending on how you answer, NPC interactions, game content, and even endings are affected. Considering I completed the game in about 10 hours on my first playthrough, where I had no idea what I was doing, you can imagine how much quicker you can get through the game in additional playthroughs if you want to see everything INAYAH has to offer. And I think that's pretty good value for your buck. Returning to the skill tree, this stuff can get pretty convoluted. Not so much that I had no idea what I was doing or building, but just enough for me to forget half the shit I could actually do. I'm talking stuff like in Death's Gambit Afterlife, where jumping gives your daggers 25% crit chance for 10 seconds, and dodging increases your attack speed by 13% for 44 seconds. And they just keep stacking on like that. I'm messing up the details on purpose, but I think you get the point. Imagine buffs like this across 3 different weapons, and it's easy to have stuff slip your mind. Regardless, I still had a lot of fun with the game's combat and was excited every time I unlocked a new node. Other than the game's plethora of skill trees, another really big component to the INAYAH experience is its cornucopia of side quests. The game has a bunch of NPCs with their own storylines and varied tasks that net you a diverse array of awards. I'm not joking when I say side quests make up half of this game, at least. And these side quests can range from collecting things, finding things, killing things, and other miscellaneous things I don't want to spoil. Moreover, there are a few quests that can have multiple outcomes based on decisions you make during the quest, adding more to the game's replayability. And the rewards for those quests range from gold dust, locations to important items like plants, optional bosses, optional areas, optional scenarios. There's seriously a lot you can do in this game that's attached to NPC side quests, so make sure you're talking to everyone you can so you're experiencing everything the game has to offer. And the game includes a pretty handy journal to help you keep all these quests in check. And the game marks objectives on the map to help you even further. To wrap this section up, there's a few interesting ways you can customize INAYAH. She gets implants that modify her in many ways, like giving her an air dash or double jump, increase weapon damage, and a bunch of other cool things like having the damage from spikes. You get one implant spot initially and unlock others by progressing the story. INAYAH can also find plants throughout the world that affects her healing, kind of like the different feathers from Death's Gambit Afterlife. One plant can give you more healing charges, while another plant reduces damage for X amount of time after healing. You can only equip one plant at a time, so considering your situation is vital to having your healing being the most effective. And that's it for this section. Progression in INAYAH Life After Gods is like walking into an all-you-can-eat buffet and realizing every dish has its own seasoning, dietary restrictions, and secret ingredient. Between the 18 skill trees, dialogue choices that reshape the story, and the side quest system that's practically a second main quest, there's a ridiculous amount of depth here. It can feel overwhelming at first, but once you settle into your build, your playstyle, and your questionable moral decisions, it all clicks. Whether you're rediscovering buffs you forgot existed or juggling implants and healing plants like a sci-fi apothecary, INAYAH rewards you for diving deep. Just be ready to commit, because this game doesn't just want you to play it, it wants you to replay it. And with all its branching paths and builds, there's a lot to come back for.
Exploration.
Exploration in INAYAH is something, I can say that much at least. There's a lot to enjoy while exploring INAYAH's world, but there's a lot to get frustrated by as well, particularly in the early game, which is exactly the part of the game when you don't want to frustrate players. So let's talk about the frustration first, because I actually left INAYAH with a very positive outlook and loved its exploration. But it was a journey to get there. First off, Let's start with a subjective pet peeve of mine that may or may not influence your take on INAYAH whatsoever. The game's first biome is huge. It's like 50% of the game at least. There are other biomes, maybe like 6 or 7, but I was seriously afraid the game's first biome was its only biome. With such a side quest heavy game where side quests demand a lot of backtracking, being confined to the game's first biome for many of its opening hours got tedious. You can only look at an overgrown train station or whatever it is for so long before it all jumbles together. Now, in the game's defense, it was my decision to stay in the first biome for as long as I did because I was doing a whole bunch of side quests. Had I parsed out these side quests and focused on the critical path, there's a good chance I would have visited at least one other biome sooner than I had. Still, that first biome is so gigantic. They could have cut it in half and it would have still been a lot to handle. Next is how platforming affects exploration in the early game. I'm never a fan of locking core platforming skills behind equipable weapons. In this case, the faux double jump that daggers give you, because doing this made early game exploration something I dreaded most of the time. I just did not like swapping weapons for basic platforming. But everything changed the moment I got an implant that increased my dagger's faux double jump by 150%, and I could actually reach areas without needing to swap to the fists, so I could fire fart for the extra 2 inches I needed. Then I got a real double jump, and all the dread and frustration melted away. And I actually looked forward to platforming for the rest of the game. I can't recall when I got the dagger implant, but I'd estimate it took me about 2 hours. The in-game map isn't the best. It's basically just squares that show you how they connect to one another. The map allows you to toggle between a local and global map, meaning you can look at all the squares at once, or you can zoom into the square you're currently in for some details. And therein lies the problem. You can only zoom into the square you're currently in, and this led to many moments of frustration because there are some boss runbacks in this game. Not always, but they do exist. And not being able to zoom in on squares I'm not currently in ended up wasting so much of my time. At one point I thought I found a shortcut to cut a particular boss runback in half, but it turns out there was a locked door stopping me from using the shortcut, and I couldn't see it because I can't freely zoom into a square I'm not in. And while we're talking about the map, might as well talk about fast travel. And there's really not a lot to say about the game's fast travel. It's a waypoint system, and I felt like the waypoints were typically near points of interest. So that's a big plus. And that's really all the frustrations I had with the game's exploration, all in the game's first fifth. After getting better double jumping options, I found the game to be an utter blast. Now, if waiting that long sounds too bad to give the game a shot, worry not. You can actually lower the difficulty at any time to obtain a free double jump. So consider that if you find early exploration frustrating like I did. With frustrations out of the way, let's talk about all the good things. Firstly, we gotta answer the million-dollar question. Is exploration in INAYAH rewarding? After getting over its initial early game bump, I can easily answer that with a resounding yes. The game's gorgeous, so taking in the biomes can be a reward in and of itself. And the game's full of mystique, so each new biome and NPC can bring a lot of intrigue to the table, pushing you to want to explore more. And with how rewarding side quests can be, giving players more lore, items, and abilities, stumbling upon NPCs is always exciting. As for the items you can find, there are gold dust caches, plants that alter your healing, implants, lore bits and bobs, including a whole Morse code shtick, which I'll dive into in the spoilers section. Add on a bunch of optional bosses, and there's just so much to come across during exploration. And that'll do it for this section. Exploration in INAYAH Life After Gods is a tale of two experiences. A rough first date that blossoms into a long-term relationship. The early hours might test your patience with biome bloat and some questionable platforming design choices, but once the game loosens its grip and starts handing out real mobility tools, it's like the world opens up and practically begs you to poke around every corner. From juicy side quests to lore-soaked oddities and secret bosses lurking in the shadows, There's always something waiting to be uncovered. Stick with it, and INAYAH proves that getting lost can be half the fun.
Atmosphere. Narrative.
Alright, let's talk vibes. If you're into haunting dystopias, ancient ruins humming with forgotten purpose, and a general sense of everything is beautiful and dead, INAYAH Life After Gods is gonna be your jam. The game's atmosphere is thick. It pulls you in with eerie sound design, amazing hand-drawn art, and a visual language that makes even the quietest hallways feel like they've got something to hide. Interestingly, though the world looks and feels abandoned and overtaken by nature most of the time, it sporadically has parts that feel lived in thanks to all the NPCs and tribes you meet while exploring. It's a post-God apocalypse, and that premise alone got me excited. One of INAYAH's biggest strengths is its world building and how it builds mystery. The world doesn't spoon-feed lore. You pick it up in scraps through NPC interactions, environmental storytelling, and I guess by audio logs left by the gods' withered remains? Or maybe they were diary entries, I don't really know. Anyway, there's a rich narrative tapestry here, but it's up to you to weave it together. Narratively, INAYAH pulls a Nier Automata-esque move. The gods are dead, but the consequences of their extinction ripple through every character and location. You're not just fighting monsters, you're trudging through the aftermath of celestial abandonment. Whether that be ancient machines left by the gods, tribes blowing things up with the gods' old equipment, or dealing with violent zealotry. What happens to a society when the beings who made them vanish? Or worse, betray them? That's the emotional undercurrent of this world, and it leads to some surprisingly poignant moments. The branching dialogue system I mentioned earlier adds to world building as your responses actually matter. They don't just change flavor text, they influence NPC interactions, unlock or block content, and alter endings. It gives the game legit role-playing chops, something not many Metroidvanias even attempt. Combine that with the fact that most of the NPCs are memorable, strange, and sometimes genuinely unsettling, and you've got a world that begs to be poked, prodded, and replayed. And though the game's visuals are top tier, I can't say the same about the voice acting. The performances come across as a little corny, which I'm personally fine with, but I wasn't a fan of the echoey effect they chose for INAYAH whenever she had inner monologue. I don't know, just didn't hit for me. All in all, I thought INAYAH's narrative was written very well. I loved the side quests, NPCs were endearing and interesting, the story did a great job at building mystery and revealing things at a comfortable pace that kept me hooked, and the endings were very satisfying. I saw some criticism about how some of INAYAH's reactions were either over the top or nonsensical, and though I agree with the former, especially in the early game, I never found INAYAH's responses to be confusing or off-putting. She's been an outcast all her life who's been treated poorly due to her looks, so now she's a bit standoffish and doesn't trust people. I felt her character spoke to that well enough. My only nitpick is that I feel the Iron Skins were underdeveloped, and I was a little confused about the Risen one. I thought they were this one character, but I guess they were a whole other character that I don't remember seeing or interacting with. This misunderstanding could entirely be on me though. Feel free to help me out in the comments. So yeah, INAYAH isn't just an action platformer full of combos and loot. It's also a melancholic, introspective narrative experience that uses its setting to enhance its storytelling. Now, this brings us to the spoilers section where I want to talk about the secret Morse code messages you can find hidden throughout INAYAH's world. I wasn't able to find all the messages, but I found 13, and I think that's a good start. But before we can talk about what these messages mean, we gotta know what actually happened to INAYAH and her world. If you're interested in that, stay where you are. If you want to skip all this so you can experience it yourself, then go to this timestamp to fast travel to my final thoughts and score.
Spoilers.
So here's the deal. The ancient gods, yeah, not just dead, they were wiped out by a virus specifically designed to kill them. But before that happened, the gods fled to a ruined Earth after they lost a celestial war against some other unknown race or entity. The gods were losing power on the verge of extinction, and in one last petty move, they resurrected humanity. Not out of benevolence, but as a weapon. They did some cruel experiments on humanity to make humans stronger, but like all things mad scientist related, the experiments turned on their experimentors. But not all the gods withered away or died. Some sealed themselves inside golden spheres, these gorgeous glowing orbs scattered across the landscape like divine tombstones. These spheres didn't just contain their bodies, but also became massive energy sources for the humans they left behind. So now, humanity's future literally runs on dead god batteries. That's metal as f***. And INAYAH herself, not your average protagonist. She's part of a rare race of people who carry the blood of the gods, which gives her that signature combat prowess and divine affinity. But she doesn't even know that at first. Over time, she uncovers the truth. Her people, her tribe, have plans to resurrect the gods and rule over humanity again. And helping them is an AI called the Voice of God, an eerie digital remnant that claims to serve the divine, but is ultimately just continuing their legacy of control and domination. Here's where things get interesting. In the good ending, INAYAH rejects all of it. She chooses not to bring the gods back and instead destroys the Voice of God, effectively severing the divine umbilical cord once and for all. She declares her true tribe was the friends she made along the way, an act of radical humanity in a world defined by divine legacy. It's a powerful ending that puts choice at the forefront. You're not just rejecting the gods, you're rejecting the cycle of control and violence they perpetuated. Alright, now that you know all that, let's talk about those Morse code messages. Disclaimer, I do not know Morse code, so I used ChatGPT to help me out here. I took screenshots of the codes and uploaded them, but ChatGPT was spitting out quotes from a space odyssey, and that felt wrong. So I painstakingly typed up all the messages myself, used a Morse code decoder, then pasted the decoded messages, which were in Slavic, I do believe, into ChatGPT, which got much better results. So, what were these messages about, and did they lead to anything juicy? Man, the messages might as well have said, be sure to drink your Ovaltine, because all I got out of the messages were philosophical musings that tie back to the game's narrative themes. I'm not gonna say I'm disappointed, but I was disappointed. Now, I didn't find all the messages. I only found 13, and I think there might be 15, so I can't conclusively say that there's nothing here. But considering 13 out of the 13 messages were essentially flavor text, I'm cool with letting somebody else look for the other 2 or so messages. But for posterity's sake, I've created a Google Doc with all the messages and translations. And I've dropped a link in the doc to the ChatGPT conversation if you want to really dive in. You can find this doc in this video's description. So, without further ado, here's what the messages I found say in English, and what I think they mean in the context of INAYAH, Life After Gods. Pozlani, a title like the Sent One or Messenger. I've also heard it means mission. This is the name of the menu where the Morse code messages are stored. If there is no God, then everything is permitted. This is a famous Dostoevsky quote. INAYAH's world is one that's lost its gods, literally. This quote is typically used as a warning about what happens to society once divine order is gone. And as we see in INAYAH's world, there are plenty of people and tribes that do morally ambiguous and terrible things. The power of knowledge lies in doubt. This paints a worldview where questioning is essential. Power doesn't come from blind belief, but from curiosity and skepticism. We see this play out in Cleo's story arc, where she stops believing in the gods' return and decides to control her own destiny. All things come to those who know how to let go. This sounds like it resonates with INAYAH's good or selfless ending, where she gives up the prospect of godhood so humanity can make their own destiny without being subservient to gods who view them as ends to a means. Wisdom through humility, not control. Wicked hands don't pin letters. This probably has something to do with how someone with evil intentions doesn't let it be known so easily. This fits with the gods and the AI's true intentions of using humanity as weapons of war. The one who loves has the right to criticize and protect. A reflection of INAYAH's journey. Her love for her friends and her conflicted heritage gives her the moral authority to challenge both her tribe and the AI Voice of God. Her defiance stems from compassion, not rebellion. These children are the judges of our future. INAYAH herself embodies this. As one of the last of her kind, her actions judge the legacy of both gods and humans. It's also a chilling reminder of how the new generation inherits the consequences of past divinities. Everyone who talks to one another is happy. Everyone who is unhappy is so in their own way. This sounds like a play on a Tolstoy quote. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Though INAYAH's quote is more focused on general communication among humanity. This reflects the isolation and disconnection seen in the post-God society. Those who dare to bond, to trust, find moments of peace in a broken world. In contrast, those who suffer do so in uniquely tragic ways. Rongo's tribe is a good example of this, coping with their weaknesses by drinking that potion that makes them stronger, but also makes them crazy. One should not interfere with people going crazy. This also relates to Rongo's tribe. I don't think this quote's meant to be deep. Stay away from crazy people, y'all. A person is what he believes in. INAYAH's internal conflict between her divine bloodline and human loyalty is encapsulated here. Her belief in free will over divine design defines her character and ultimately shapes the story's climax. There is no greatness where there is no simplicity, goodness, and truth. A philosophical rebuke to the manipulation and cruelty of the voice of God. INAYAH's simple acts of kindness and honesty stand as greater achievements than the AI's grand plans for divine resurrection. God is with you, but are you with God? This question mirrors INAYAH's dilemma. Should she embrace her divine origins or reject them? It's a haunting echo of the duality she must resolve, whether to follow her blood or her heart. Getting used to what is given from above becomes a replacement for happiness. This critiques blind faith and resignation. This quote seems to just reinforce INAYAH's themes, mainly that relying on dead gods' blessings will ultimately steal away your happiness. Kinda like taking things for granted. And there's satisfaction in a job well done. If I had to directly link this to INAYAH, maybe it speaks to INAYAH's birth tribe and how they blindly followed the voice of God instead of creating their own way and happiness. Maybe. A person's punishment lies within himself. You are your own worst critic. Perfect for the game's introspective tone. INAYAH and others carry guilt, trauma, and identity crises that no external force can match. The real judgment is self-inflicted, buried deep within. Unless you're Rongo and have a dad actually judging you. And that's all the messages I found. If anyone finds the ones I missed, feel free to add them to the Google Doc. Or someone can steal my Google Doc and post it in the game's Steam discussion board. I don't really mind.
Final thoughts and score.
INAYAH Life After Gods is a bold, ambitious Metroidvania that's brimming with customization options and reasons to replay it. With its Hollow Knight level fluidity and Blasphemous 2 inspired weapon variety, combat is a deep well of experimentation. Bosses are tough, but fair, unless you're like me and fight the hardest ones first out of pure stubbornness. And the platforming, while occasionally hand-cramping, is satisfyingly intricate thanks to its weapon-swapping traversal. The game's massive skill tree system might initially overwhelm, but it ends up rewarding players who invest the time to explore and customize. Between the impactful dialogue decisions, excellent presentation, and genuinely fun and challenging combat and platforming, INAYAH carves out a memorable identity in an increasingly crowded genre. It's not a perfect game, the early difficulty spikes might scare off or frustrate the faint of heart, but if you stick with it and are looking for a rich, challenging, and beautiful Metroidvania, this one deserves a spot on your radar. I award INAYAH Life After Gods an 8 out of 10.
I smell nothing good ahead.
INAYAH Life After Gods is available for PC. I played it exclusively on the Steam Deck with 0 issues and thus award INAYAH a Steam Deck rating of verified.
Pair placement.
INAYAH Life After Gods is an excellent experience thanks to its art, themes, world building, combat, and platforming. It does stumble here and there in early game platforming due to traversal skills being locked to weapons and forcing you to swap with some awkward shoulder button pressing. But once you get an actual double jump, platforming becomes more fun than frustrating. Challenging and respectful of your intelligence, INAYAH is an MV worth checking out. INAYAH Life After Gods finds its tribe in the B tier.
Tribes, bugs. Right. And what would a queen want?
Map? No one's seen a bug with a map. They can't read it. Bugs are
INAYAH Life After Gods is a fun game full of mystery and, more importantly, answers to those mysteries. so the game won't leave you hanging as long as you pay attention and do a little exploring. All in all, it's an undeniably good time.
How hard is the walk alone?